Welcome to this video tutorial using Form for sound design for musical and post-production audio purposes. In this video, I'll be showing you a wide variety of basic and advanced functions that Form is capable of. It's important to note that Form is not a conventional synthesizer, rather it's a sample-based oscillator and it can use all sorts of tricks. One, for example, is the speed and motion functions, which is very, very useful. So since this is a sample-based instrument, I'm going to go to the sample page or tab. Then I'm going to my desktop. For demonstration purposes, I placed it there. And I'm going to drag in a waveform. This waveform you can then preview. Sounds like so. In there, you can then select the start and end. In this case, I'm going to move the end locator because there's no information there. So I'm going to press load. Once it is loaded, you can then play it at different pitches, of course. Very useful now is that we can choose the range we want to focus in. We can always change this later if we want to. So this will now sound like so. Where this now gets very handy is that we can change the sample speed. As you change the speed, you will see the pitch goes lower. One little trick I can show you is that if you have a very small range and choose it strategically and you put this on 0, you'll get a basic waveform. And of course, this can be modulated and so on. If you make it a little bit longer, like so, and you make it very slow, you will hear the sound that is morphing, of course, depending on your preset or sample. If we now make this slightly longer again, we can then choose, I'm going to make it a bit faster. Right now it's playing from left to right. Now, the way this works is you've got motion, and motion is going to really change the pitch and playback. Now, there's an important thing behind this all, because this synthesizer's got an algorithm. It's called the pitch synchronous overlap and add algorithm. And what this means is not only will it take the sample, and you can play 2 pitches at once, but it will also take this information within the sample and you can apply this to the sample itself, for example, through its rhythm and so on, or through its envelope. If we then go to sample preset, now I'm going to choose another one so you can hear how it sounds. Same sound, but it's been now changed. We've got 3 pages full of presets. Let's go to the next page and listen to another 1 or 2. As can be heard, that's quite a complex sound. So all sorts of things that we can do, and this is directly related to the sample. We can choose sample in the sample length. We can choose it in hertz. So I'll just quickly go back to the sample page like so, and you can choose it to loop if you want. So you can make it go fast or slow. Now, what I have not mentioned yet is that you can choose basically the tempo. So for example, if I do this, it will almost sound like we're starting to be in another time signature. So let's quickly do the same. We'll just choose a very basic set so you can hear the change in tempo or feel. I'll make it a bit faster. This will give a compound time signature effect. If you don't like the presets, you can always make your own. And what you do is you click on the curve editor. So on the curve editor, you can then, as the name states, change the curve. So here, for example, you can hear the pitches rising. You can flip it. This will reverse it. This is great for movie with a flashback or whatever. If you want to, you can split it. So if you go to split, now you can have 2 of these. And of course, you can choose other waveforms. We can flip it again. One useful thing as well is that we can change the range that it will play in. So for example, if we choose this one and we flip it back. So with 2 notes, there we have a very different sound that we already started with. Of course, you can do a variety of other things. Say, for example, if you choose the sine wave, with the sine wave, you can choose, for example, how fast. You can make it slow. You can copy it, you can move things up and down all at once, so you can have macro-like functions. You can change the speed. You can make it very slow if you want to. And you can also change the loop length. So if you want it to be just one portion, for example. As can be heard, there's quite a wide variety of tonal changes that we can make. Now, at this point, I have not done anything to the other parameters available in the synthesizer, which I'll show you next. Now that we've got a basic sound, there's all sorts of things we can start to do, and this is where Form excels quite a bit. In the Perform section, we've got 12 slots, and how these slots works is that you can have the same sound, and you can, as soon as you change any parameter, it will remember it automatically. So now this is my current sound. As soon as I click on another one, we will be back to the original, which is quite handy. So I'm just going to cut off that again. Okay. Then what we can do is I'm going to show now all of the additional functions we've got in the sound tab. Here for the form oscillator, say for example, we can change the pitch. We can make it go up or down, lower or higher. We can change the formant. So this changes the formant separately from the pitch, fundamental pitch. And say for example, if you move it low, that will almost be like a bass marimba of some sort. Along with this, you can make the formant move with. So this will create a very raspy digital sound, which can be very useful if you so desire. And with the pan function, I will show you later on when we go to the multi-mode, why that we've done it. Of course, we can do panning within our DAW, so it would be a bit strange why we can do this, but Form has got a nice little trick up its sleeve. Underneath this, we've got the additive oscillator. In here, we've got a very basic waveform, sine. Along with this, what we can do is we can choose the waveform. So we can have it from a sine to a square. And what they've done, a nice design, is you don't have to go up in semitones. You can just go, they go from to +7, which is a perfect fifth, or to an octave. And you can move up quite fast in this way. Now for demonstration purpose, I'm going to put on the loop. So we're going to have this. Now what happens if you turn down the amplitude, you will still hear that the additive oscillator takes the exact same rhythmical envelope of the sample waveform and applies this to this additive oscillator. So it means you don't have to apply anything because it will simply follow exactly along, like this. If we then, for example, change the motion, you can hear it will be an exact same as if we had. Now for the next example, I'd like to show the modulation system, as this is quite useful and very well thought through. So here we've got this basic, I'm just going to slow down a bit. If you click on any parameter or just below the parameter, you'll see there's a white little box that lights up. Then we'll have 3 modulation slots, and on these slots we can then choose 3 different modulations of all sorts. These are the modulations we've got available. You can also choose them as macros if you wanted to. So you'll see the macro controllers is the ones that call M1 to M4, and we can do other things as well. So on LFO1, for example, you can now choose to do, for example, positive or negative. So you'll now see this waveform starts to shift. Now, of course, we can go to LFO1 and we can make this faster or slower. We can choose another oscillator, LFO, for example, if we wanted to. We can have one positive and one negative. So I'd like to demonstrate how this works. So for example, now I've got LFO. I'm just going to make it a bit slower. LFO1, and that's going to hop up and down. Then I'm going to take another one. I'm going to choose number 2. And then I'm going to make that go negative. And then for number 2, I'm going to make this in another waveform. And now you'll get the combined effect of these two. So I'll make one bit faster. So now you've got a modulation that isn't either of these, but the sum together. And we can then basically have this underneath. So definitely a useful function to look out. Next up, I'd like to demonstrate how the oscillator effects can work, because these are very handy in terms of tonal transformation. So here's our basic sound we had earlier. I'm just going to change because I've now chosen a new performer slot. And then underneath, I'm just going to move this in a bit, like so. I'm going to then go to the form. And you can hear this is definitely changing the pitch and this envelope start. So you can get quite a wide variety of tones just with this one knob. One thing to note is that as soon as you put on deform, you'll see the pitch track has been disabled. So that won't follow along exactly anymore. But you can still change the pitch with the keyboard. Okay, I'm going to put on loop. You can hear we get a little bit more distortion. And then very handily, we've got an FM modulator. So this is frequency modulation. Very handy for quite a digital sound. These do interrelate. So for example, if you change the form, that will definitely have a very big impact on all the other parameters. And the feature here is the stereo selector. What we can do is we can make a either left or right, and we can favor the other, and it will create a house-like effect. And you can choose this or that side. The multiply function is similar to the additive oscillator. What it does is it's simply going to duplicate the sound and move it up in pitch. One difference is though you cannot select, for example, the waveform, and you cannot modulate that in terms of how it will do volume. Next, I'd like to demonstrate the effects that it comes with form. I'm going to make a new patch if you like, because essentially we're creating a blank. I'm just going to make this part shorter again. Of course, if I wanted to, I could rather just play this part as the delayed section. But for demonstration purpose, I'll keep these two. Now that we've got our basic sound, I'm going to then go to, we've got a few different effects. We've got the frequency shaper, which is quite a handy effect. It's got a built-in distortion as well. We've got a compressor, we've got a delay and a reverb. And there's a nice little function between these two. Let's go one by one and we'll see the type of sound that we can get. So here's our basic sound again. You can distort in this. You can hear it's quite harsh. You can change the both of these, or you can choose it to per band. So you can choose which one you want it to affect. I'm going to put that off for now. Now one thing that's useful about this, I'm just going to put on loop, is that we can then basically filter which area we want. We can choose how wide or narrow it is. I'm going to move the filter and move it thinner. Then for the pink, so now there's a big gap here that we're emitting. So you can choose how you want to do this. You can have dry and wet, so you can have the full sound, we can have the filtered sound. Now after we've got this filtered sound, I'm just going to move it down a little bit. Say for example with level, we can then take the modulator, we're going to take LFO1, and I'm just going to move this one a little bit up, so we can get some movement. And then for the second one, I'm going to take this one, I'm going to move the same, let's say LFO2, and I'm going to move it negative. Of course, then we can go to sound, and then on LFO1 we can now set the speed, and if LFO2 we can also set the speed, or choose a waveform. And now we've got a rhythmical type of sound, which is unlike what we had before. Next up, we've got a basic compressor. So this is quite handy if you just want to tuck in the dynamics of a specific sound. You can choose the attack, so it will attack it quite strongly. And you can hear it is squashing it quite nicely. So of course, depending on the style, you'll set this differently. Up next, we've got a handy delay, as can be heard. One thing, all of these parameters can also be modulated, which can make very interesting, for example, if you were to take the length, which might make sci-fi-like sounds. Let's quickly do it. So I'm going to choose LFO1, and I'm going to make it go positive. Of course, there you can choose on LFO 1 the waveform. And of course, you can choose the level if you wanted to. One thing that would not work, which would be quite handy, is you cannot set a dry wet, but you can choose to steer width if you want to. So you'll be stuck with the original sound, because sometimes the processed version might be more interesting than the original sound, but that's just one limit. Up next, we've got the reverb. You can hear immediately we've got a bit of space. We can choose a large space, a cheap, nice modulating sound. This can be very useful. Now, I'd just like to show, say for example, if we take this with the delay, let's just put that modulation off. We can then choose for the delay, because currently they're in parallel, we can then choose for it to delay into the reverb. So for example, if we change that length, compare it, so you can hear it's feeding into it. For this last section, I'm going to show how to make use of the performer function, and this is one of the very well thought through design elements of the synthesizer. You'll see we've got 12 slots. You can then set it with a keyboard which range you want it to be, so you can basically perform it in, or you can sequence it in. You can also say on which channel it should be. So now the way this works is you can choose, for example, this is our first sound we made. This is the second one. And as can be heard, we can change the parameter on this one, and we can go back and we'll keep it. It will automatically save. So this is very useful, one, for experimentation, and two, of course, great for performance. This doesn't have to be just for live performance, but you can think about it as performance for within a song. So a lot of modern production lacks the sense of a musician playing to an audience, or a musician playing their instrument. This is a good way to introduce that feeling. So you can go from one sound, for example, this could be the verse sound, if you like, and this could be maybe like the break or whatever. Now, what's useful on top of this, for the next example, I'll show how you can combine these sounds. So for the next part, I'd like to show, if you have these sounds and you go to this thing called the multi-mode, so you've basically got single mode, which is going to sound like this. So that will simply play this one sound. Then we've got unison, and it will basically make a duplicate and detune it. You can have more voices if you want. We'll make it a bit fuller sounding. One thing that's super useful is that this pan function. Of course, we could modulate this and make an auto panel-like effect, or whatever we desire. What we can do is we've got two sounds here. So this is one sound, and this is the other. If you go to multi-mode, you can now have both of them play together. So you'll see we've got this sort of linchpin. This says this is the one that we're going to work from. If we had more, then you could choose more. So here's our two sounds now combined together. So you've got a maximum of 4 and a minimum of 2. So just to illustrate the difference, so this is how the one sound will sound, and the other. And then we get a much fuller sound if we combine both together. And this is a great way to introduce not only movement, but a fuller texture to a modern production, which is what most producers do anyway. One can see with this, there's a very good workflow. This is one of the strengths of Form. You can work very quickly. You can move things in and out. Once you get used to the parameters, it's a very intuitive synthesizer. I hope you enjoyed it, and take care.